Well, welcome to an awkwardly awesome podcast fan favorite. When Serge van Neck and I recorded this episode, we had just met. Since then, we've become friends, and I've had the good fortune on going on a variety of walks with Serge where we've taken photos. And then recently, he invited me. He said he wanted to do a photo shoot with me in it as part of a new book project he's working on. And the more I am exposed to his photography, the more impressed I am with the seriousness he devotes to the craft, with his artistry. And when he was doing the photo shoot where I was the subject, he made me feel so at ease. So I invite you to watch this episode and really think about what photography means to you, and moreover, what artistry means to you, and what dedicating yourself to something you love means to you. Hope you very much enjoy. Thanks.
Today's guest, Serge van Neck.
Hi there, Jason. It's great to see you.
Great to see you, Serge. Thanks for being on Awkwardly Awesome Podcast.
It's my pleasure.
So, can we jump right into it?
Sure, go for it.
So, what are a few images that leap to mind when you think about growing up in the Netherlands?
Images?
Or moments? Or
yeah,
whatever.
so, well, I grew up in Amsterdam, for one thing, and I think most people have seen pictures of Amsterdam, the canals and the old merchants' buildings there, very narrow, very tall, beautiful gables, 1700s. And a lot of that is indeed what you see. I lived in pretty much central Amsterdam, so
Wow.
kind of the apartment that I grew up in for most of my youth was part of a 6-story block, probably built somewhere either right before the war or right after the war. I don't remember. Very, very narrow streets. But it's Amsterdam is, it's a very special city to me because it has a certain atmosphere, even within Holland, that just makes people love it. It's just like why people love Chicago or New York or places like that, or San Francisco. It has a real character. And then in my later, like when I turned 13, by the way, my parents were divorced when I was about 6, but they remained friends, which was really wonderful.
Can you say a little about that? I hear about this sometimes. What was the benefit to you of your parents remaining friends?
Well, for one thing, I wasn't being used as a political football. You know what I'm saying? There was, and I see it here too. Sometimes I really hate it when divorces get out of hand, but I love it when the parents both recognize that, hey, they made a child and they have joint responsibility for raising that child, and it is in everybody's best interest, especially the child's, to be team members on that, and my parents definitely were that. And and like it was pretty special because I think my mother ended up being a witness at my dad's second wedding. And I remember one occasion where I had to go to a friend's house because she was going to babysit me. I was already pretty, probably could have stayed home by myself. But I remember my mom and my dad, who was already married to a second wife, decided to go on a friend date to celebrate what would have been 12 and a half years of their marriage, which of course the marriage ended already. But I remember that as being so important to me. Like, my mom and dad still love each other as people and as human beings, and they love me. And, and decisions were made in consultation. So at a certain point, I was having some trouble in school with bullying and everything in Amsterdam. And just through consultation between me, my mom, and my dad, and my stepmom, we decided that maybe I should go live with my dad for a while. He lived in a smaller town in the country, further south. And when I say in the south of the country, it's only like 40 minutes away. It's a small country, but it was a very different environment and a smaller school. And I really did thrive there much, much better. This was about 8th grade. And that house, by the way, just to draw a picture of it, had the year 1630 on the gable.
Wow.
And that, and it was, there had been some modifications, but it was a very old house, and there were nooks and crannies of that house that, where you could explore and things like that. And then there was a big cathedral behind our house that was built in 1170. So
wow.
It's about a lot of history that you just don't find around here, at least not in terms of the architecture and things like that.
So throughout my life, I've been fortunate to visit places with a lot of history, but I've never lived in a historical place like you're describing. What did you learn from life about life from living in a place that has so much architecture from the past?
I think
from the more distant,
Yeah, and I think the only way I can really answer that question is by drawing kind of a contrast to after I moved here. You're probably familiar with this London Bridge that somebody dismantled and moved to Arizona and then built it back up brick by brick.
In Lake Havasu. I've never seen that. But...
Yeah, Lake Havasu. And first of all, it looks really out of place, but but also it is out of place. And that is the thing that I think that when you grow up in Europe or in an old, in an old environment where there's a lot of history like that, it's like historical buildings, that there's a certain reverence for old things and the place and the ground that it stands on. There's this idea you can't just, pick something up and move it somewhere and have it be the same thing because it lost its context. And there's quite a few, these monuments. They usually have a little plate on a building or something if it's a monument, and it means that it's protected. Roman legions walked there, and so it's not unusual for people to find Roman coins and other things like that sometimes. And, there's just so much of that there. And so I think there's just a reverence for things that have been built and have stood the test of time. This is why, when they put a McDonald's somewhere, they don't just like tear the building down and put one of those McDonald's buildings in. They just shove the McDonald's into the existing building wherever it happens to be,
So I hadn't thought of it quite that way, but if the shoving things into old buildings. There's a lot more adaptation involved in that versus tearing things down and building something new. You have to adapt to the
Absolutely.
contours of the old building.
Absolutely. I mean, even when I lived in that old house, it had already been subdivided. It was a much, much bigger house. It was a mansion. It was already subdivided into two houses. The very wide hallway was two narrow hallways, and we knew our neighbors, but that was a totally separate house then. So, and of course, electricity had been added and a kitchen had been added. So, like that kind of stuff had already changed. And then, I hadn't seen that house since I was about 21, and then about 6 years ago, my dad passed away, and we made a quick trip to Holland to go to his funeral, and we had a chance to visit the old house that was still owned by one of our friends because he had moved on, but and she had done a beautiful job renovating it, but I didn't recognize it.
Oh.
And it was bittersweet, because the house was still there and it was actually in much better shape than it had ever been. She'd done a lot of wonderful work on it, but it was very modernized inside. It looked like looked like an IKEA,
I bet that was a shock.
It was a bit of a shock, but I can't feel bad about it. It was just one of those things where, wow, this is not what and I guess the only negative part was I really wanted to show Valeria and my wife, like, oh, here's the room I used to sleep in and stuff. And it was still there, but it wasn't there, because they moved walls. And so, yeah. But, time moves on. You can't stop it.
Speaking of modernizing and moving on, you moved from the Netherlands, history, water, Europe to Phoenix,
Yes.
Arizona.
Yeah.
What is that transition like?
Yeah. Well, and it happened because my mom, who was no longer in charge of me at the time, was able to go on this dream trip of hers to Egypt, and on the top of the Great Pyramid in Giza, she met this American guy, and they got married, and then she moved to the United States, and then
so on top of a pyramid in Egypt, she met an American guy,
right?
And he lived in Phoenix?
He lived in New Jersey, but then they moved to Phoenix shortly thereafter. Yeah. So, yeah. So I had actually been visiting here, like in Arizona, like since I was 14. Every year I'd come on vacation,
Well, why?
To go see my mom,
She had moved to Arizona.
Right. And then when I was 17, I got word that what happened was I got word that my stepmom had left my dad. She wrote me a letter, and that was a long time coming, and I knew that. My dad was not a very easy person to live with at all, and at that time I was basically faced with a decision. I could go back and be with my dad, because I was living with him, and or I could stay. I was offered the possibility of staying in the United States, and my stepdad would take care of my green card and everything. And I actually had a very interesting dream about that when I woke up from it, it was like, I know what I got to do. I got to stay here. And because and it was a very difficult decision, and my dad was not happy, and family over there was like, what are you doing? But I don't ever regret that decision. I love being here. I'm now I have dual citizenship now. And I love this country, and I loved Arizona. It was beautiful. But then, and I'd never set foot in South Dakota until 2018. And then all of a sudden I was like, oh my gosh, this place is beautiful too. I had no idea.
So at the point when you moved to Arizona, were you interested in photography at all?
You know, what's interesting is not no and yes. No, because it wasn't really on my mind, but it wasn't really at that time. But like as I sort of, because I was 17 and I just needed to finish high school, go to college, and I was really interested in computers, and that's what I pursued. But I always had an interest in photography. I always wished I would always look at, you know, single lens reflex cameras and like, oh my gosh, I can never afford that and this and that. And would it be, and I always, it was one of those things that I always thought I could never understand, because like what do all those knobs and buttons do? And, you know, how do you figure out the light and all those kinds? And I didn't know what an f-stop was. It was just really, really intimidating to me. And so I just, you know, I really, you know, of course I had film cameras, but they're all point and shoot. And which, by the way, you can use to make nice pictures, but never really thought of going, you know, really getting into photography. And then one time, I think it was like, yeah, it was like 2013, 2014. I was always like an early adopter. I'm one of those people who buy the bleeding edge of stuff. And I had one of the early digital cameras, and it was terrible image quality. And but oh my gosh, you know, you can see the picture right away. And and I started adding up all the money I'd spent on, you know, mediocre cameras, and thinking, my gosh, I could have bought all kinds of beautiful, you know, professional camera equipment for all the money I spent on all the travel cameras and stuff. And so then Costco had a deal, and it's like, okay, I'm getting this kit, you know, just a real basic Nikon DSLR kit with 2 lenses. And then like first thing was playing around with it and like, hey, this doesn't look anything better than I can get out of a point and shoot. What am I doing wrong? And then, so I started learning, and I'm like, oh, I see what's going on. And then I figured out that this whole thing with f-stops and shutter speeds and ISO, it's so incredibly simple. And I'm like, why did I ever wait? You know, I was just like, I was afraid to learn about it. And then once I figured it out, then it was just a matter of practicing and practicing to where I really understood this relationship. You know, I kind of compare it to, I don't know if you ever driven a stick shift, but like, you know, driving a stick shift seems really intimidating to people. Mm-hmm. And it did to me until somebody said, you're going to get into this car, you're going to learn to drive it. And, you know, once I actually figured it out, it was like, oh gosh, why can't people just tell me this is what you do? You don't pop the clutch, you just gently take it off, you know? And, and that was the same kind of epiphany on my part, like, wow, the exposure triangle is actually an extremely simple concept, but it is a mechanical concept, and you do have to kind of have somebody really just explain it to you in basic terms, and then you go forward. And by the way, I want to just clarify that that's not required to be a photographer. However, it helps you to make the best out of your photography, to know the ins and outs of light, to really understand light.
How has it helped you make the best out of your photography?
Well, for one thing, each of those different, you know, when I say the exposure triangle, I'm talking about the shutter speed, the ISO, which is the sensor's sensitivity, or the film sensitivity if you're shooting film. And then the f-stop, and the f-stop it's really the aperture is what we call it. But it's designated by f something, so that's why we call it f-stop. And each of those things has a different result on how the picture looks. And that's the thing. And probably the most obvious one is the aperture, where if you open the aperture way up, so the lens is like this, you know, wide open, it creates a very narrow depth of field. So like you can isolate your subject. So you have to really focus on something, and then everything else before it or behind it is blurred out. And then if you close that aperture down to where it's like a little point, and that's the higher numbers, it's like f11, f16. What that does is it brings everything into focus, so that, you know, if you want to actually see what's behind somebody, that's what you do. So that a lot of times determines the other things that you're going to have to set, like what kind of picture do you want to take? Do you want to take a portrait where everything else is blurred, or do you want to show someone in their environment, or just show the environment overall to where everything is in focus? But when you do that, you're affecting how much light comes in to your sensor or onto your film. So now you have to make an adjustment on the part of the shutter speed or something else. So
as you have this conversation, do you want to look at any picture in particular?
Sure. And there's some examples. Let me the black and white one with the child in the center would be a good one to talk about in terms of depth of field.
Oops. Oh, I know what you mean.
It's a crowd. Yeah.
Why am I not finding it here?
Or we can just look
at here.
Oh, you found it? Okay. Or we can look at other ones and just.
Oh.
Yeah, that one. So this is an example where I used a lens that both has a very wide aperture, meaning it can really isolate a subject. And it's also kind of a long lens, meaning it's like a telephoto lens. And the two things work together for this picture. And by the way, I love this photo because this boy was looking at the stage. This is over at the Levitt. And I just thought
the Levitt's an outdoor stage in Sioux
That's right. It's an outdoor stage in downtown Sioux Falls, and they have free concerts there in the summer. And so this kid was just looking at the stage, and he had just this great look on his face, and so I just thought that was a great picture. So I started to take the picture, and he immediately turned and clocked me like he knew I was there. And I was like, for a half a second, I thought, oh, I don't want to take this picture. But then I'm like, no, I'm taking this picture. And I'm really glad I did, because it's such a great picture. And he just looks right through your soul in this picture. But if you see the crowd in the background is really blurred out. And, you know, so that's that effect where the foreground is very much in focus, and everything else in the background is fading out into a blur. And that's because I had it wide open. And, you know, our own eyes do that too. When they, you know, when our pupils are dilated, we have more focus on something, and then everything else is blurry. That's just the way that light works, light refraction. So there's another aspect of this picture that I would like to talk about, and that is because it was a longer lens, and I don't know if focal lengths mean anything to anybody, but this is a 135 millimeter lens, so it's a little bit longer than, you know, a normal lens that you would take holiday snaps with. It's not quite something you use for bird watching, but so. What happens with that is something called compression. And if you notice, the people who are behind the first row look like they're almost touching that first row, when in fact they're several feet behind. And all those people in subsequent rows look like they're all kind of jammed together, but they're actually quite far apart. And that is it's an aspect. It's really a feature of longer lenses to have that effect. And, you know, that combined with the very shallow depth of field makes for this particular kind of picture where the crowd is very much a crowd. It's very tightly, stuck together.
It is just a great effect. There's so much. There's the boy, and then there's so much. I would say almost contour in the background crowd.
Right.
It's beautiful. So how talk about please how the lens of your photography weaves into the lens of your faith a little bit.
Sure. So I'm a member of the Baha'i faith, and the Baha'i faith believes in the universality of mankind and of God and of religion, in the sense that it's all one. And as a result of that, we also very strongly believe in unity and diversity, that the diversity of the human race. The human race is like a flower garden. And, if you had a garden that had just one color flower, it would not be a very interesting garden. And instead, we have all these beautiful colors, and then we all these different cultures and these different styles of music and these different types of food and all these different languages that all have their own characteristics and their own poetry and their own song. And so that is something that is a cause of joy and beauty and harmony, not something to be afraid of. And so we love diversity, and that definitely has an effect on how I see the world as a photographer. And I do talk about that. My what do you call that, tagline is one world, many lenses. The idea is that we each have our own lens through which we see our world, and we have our own perspective, and each of those perspectives is valid in some way. And so one of the things that is interesting about photography is that when you take a picture, you're not taking a 360-degree picture. You're taking a rectangle. You're slicing a rectangle out of your view, and by the very act of doing that, you're editing the world. You are shaping that picture to your perspective, because you noticed that particular thing, and everything outside of that box is invisible. And then on top of that, your choice of film or your choice of editing can have an additional effect on conveying your mood as you see that. So there is a picture that that was very early on. I think that picture is from 2014 or 2015. I was really experimenting with photography, and one of the things I was experimenting with was long exposures, where you leave the shutter open for multiple seconds. And of course, it had to be on a tripod for that. And this was in downtown Tempe, Arizona, which is where Arizona State University is located.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, this is Mill Avenue. There's a lot of bars and shops and everything. And so I just took the light rail down there and with my camera and a tripod, and I set up there and just put it up on a street corner and just started shooting different directions and just tried different things and played around with the shutter speed and with the aperture. And for this kind of stuff, you really want to stop the aperture all the way down, because you want to have as long as possible on that shutter. And so this particular picture was one of those that I didn't realize what I had until I came home and loaded it up in Lightroom, because it's a photo editor. And I believe this was 6 seconds that the shutter was open, and these two people were walking there. I can't even tell if they were walking in the same direction or different directions, but what you see is this is Arizona, so it's very hot in the summer, and even at night never gets below 90 degrees. And so they have misters. They just, restaurants have misters that keep it kind of cool. And so these misters are spraying right out into the sidewalk. And so these people were walking through that. So it has this beautiful effect of being sort of ghostly apparitions. And that's some of the stuff you can do with photography, is to really do some interesting effects.
So, I've loved this picture since I first saw it on your website. A few things about it. So you had a whole scene here, like 360 scene. How do you choose to focus on this nugget?
Yeah, this particular, part of it was just experimentation in this case, just setting up and aiming it down the street. But I did frame it in a certain way. And if you see, there's a tree there, and the tree sort of like bends over to the left, and then you have the lights and the restaurants on that left side. So there's sort of a framing happening there. There's a little bit of a almost like a circle happening in the bottom 2/3 of that picture. And I don't know, I can't even tell you if it was really a conscious decision I made, or if I just saw something and I put it there. Because a lot of times, especially early on, I knew really nothing about composition of photography, but I just seemed to have kind of a knack for it. People were telling me, like, "Oh, that's a great composition." It's like, "What do you mean?" So it was later that I really started to kind of study that. So this was probably more luck than anything. And this was one of my first pictures in Sioux Falls. We had just we were meeting with. So anyway, this was actually after I moved to Sioux Falls. But I remember seeing this mural before we had moved yet, and we were looking at a rental house in the Whittier neighborhood. And that was, again, because of my worldview, I saw this and I thought, oh, this is so beautiful. This is really, I'm going to like this neighborhood, And so when the first or second snow, I can't remember, but we moved in November. So it was shortly thereafter, there was there was a lot of snow that fell. And I decided to walk over to the park. I lived literally half a block from Melton Park, where this is at, which is on like 6th Street in Lewis, I think. And so I walked over and just took a bunch of pictures, this being my favorite one, before anybody had a chance to walk all over the snow. And so I just love this concept. They have this pure driven snow and just the offset against the bright colors of this beautiful mural, which students, I think middle school students from Whittier helped design. It was their project. They, of course, had a professional muralist come in 2013. I read about this later. And the other thing is, so the name of this mural is called "The World Comes to Whittier." And there's a website that talks about it. And what I didn't realize, that the neighborhood I had moved into was sometimes known as the Ellis Island of the Plains, with all the immigration over the years. And of course, I lived right across from an apartment complex that had a lot of Congolese people, Nepalese people, native people, somebody from Ukraine. And I met quite a few of them. And I think in the past, a lot of people from Central America had migrated there. So it's a very rich area. And also just, other people there, but it's not just migrants, or immigrants. But I really, and again, it's also an old neighborhood, which I felt really comfortable in, having come from, Europe and old places.
In the photo, the black and white and all the color really coexist. It's amazing.
Right. Yeah. It's like the bottom half of the picture is black and white, and the top half. And I didn't even thank you. I had not even noticed that.
Including the shadows on the bottom half.
Yeah, because there's a rich grayscale there with the shadow on the snow.
So we haven't asked this, or I haven't asked this yet. You were in Phoenix. What circumstances took you from Phoenix to Rosebud in South Dakota? Rosebud is not huge.
Right. Yeah. So I guess the short answer is Providence or God, whatever you want to say. But because things after the fact seemed all prearranged. But there's somebody that I had met a number of years, 5 years earlier, because of a book I had written, and she had invited me to give a talk about this book at some point, which I had to decline because of my family situation at the time. And we became Facebook friends, and that was it. And then 5 years later, or actually like 4 years later, my marriage unfortunately ended. And a year after that, the same person and I ended up in a conversation on Facebook, and she had family real close to where I lived. And so she had visited. I'd met her once. I actually met her a couple of times already. And she was about to visit her brother again. And I offered to pick her up from the airport. And then we got talking on the phone just to set up the logistics. And then that phone call lasted a long time. And then she invited me to work on a project because she was a Baha'i also. And she had a youth project that she was doing on the reservation, with youth from all over the Dakotas, and asked me if I would like to help out with that. And I said I was definitely interested. And then by the time we were done talking about that, we were already in love. And then when she came over a few days later, it was really more of a conversation about who's going to move where. Talking about marriage. And fortunately, I had a job that I still do have the same job that allowed me to move. Really just work from home. I'm a software developer. That's what I do for a living. Photography so far has not yet allowed me to to stop doing that. But anyway, and she was a teacher on the Rosebud Reservation, a really beloved teacher. And so we moved in together in a different house in teacher housing. And after we got married in Phoenix. And then, so I just really changed my zip code, and I changed my time zone. And the only thing my boss really wanted to know was, do you have good internet? And it was good enough. So that's how I ended up on the Rosebud. Yeah.
So, have you ever been to the Midwest before you moved to Rosebud?
I had many years prior. I had gone on a long drive to Iowa one time and then come back. And then also around that same time, we're talking the 80s, I'd been through like the West Coast, go up the West Coast, and then driven back down, and gone through Vancouver and Calgary and back down. But I don't think we ever actually hit the Dakotas in that. So I think it was through Montana. So I literally had never set foot in the Dakotas until 2018.
So what delighted you about suddenly living on the Rosebud Indian Reservation?
It's funny because like it was probably even more of a shock than moving from Holland to Phoenix, because like I went from a big city to a big city. But
Like, give us a sense of what's the population of Rosebud, like thousands of people?
yeah, but so the town I lived in was Mission, which had a sign as its population 1,156, I remember. So like less than 1,200 people. Then there's the town of Rosebud, which also has something like that. And then there's a couple of other smaller towns around there, and also like settlements, like I don't know what they call them, but they're like cluster housing, like Two Strike and He Dog and places like that. So I can't. I honestly don't know the actual population. I think maybe it's 15,000 total over the entire reservation. I don't know.
So you moved to a place with millions of people to a place with 15,000 people.
Right. Yeah. All spread out, and with gorgeous landscapes in between. And also a really interesting dynamic, which is that there's white people and there's native people, and the place belongs to the native people, for one thing. And the beauty about my wife being a teacher is that, you know, most of her students, if not all of them, certainly most of them, were native. And so also she knew a lot of parents. And so I was immediately, and she's a very social person, and so I was immediately introduced to I'm not talking about the parents of the children, but in general, just a lot of beautiful people, both white and native, and Black as well. And my wife is Black, by the way. And so learning about, first of all, learning some words and Lakota words and things like that. I just started, I was interested in learning the language because I thought it was going to be there for a long time. And my wife does speak some Lakota as well, and well enough that she can get by with the language. And but anyway, just the combination of the people and just the sense of the land. I mean, Grass Mountain is so beautiful, and and I took some. I'm not sure if I gave you any landscape pictures. There's just one I took, I think, on the Rosebud that I gave you.
So is this one from the Rosebud?
Yes, actually it is. And so this is one of those things where, there's beautiful nature, and there's also, like, what I really love is where nature, the natural world, and the human world collide. And I think this is one of those places. And we talked about this in email before, that I have a real affinity for decaying things. I don't know why. I think I'm not alone in that. I know other people that would love to take pictures of falling down shacks and things like that. And I have definitely a few of those in my catalog. So I love this picture because this trailer had been driving, commuting back and forth. Sometimes I would drive my wife if the weather was bad, because she had a 35-minute commute to the school, and if the weather was really bad, I wanted to be sure that she got to drive it. We got to drive it in the all-wheel drive vehicle, and also just to keep her company. So I would take her to school and pick her up sometimes. And so many times I drove by this one place where this trailer was sitting, and every time I told myself, I got to take a picture of that. And finally, I brought a camera along, and I told myself, okay, I'm just going to take a picture of it now. And of course, a digital camera, but I decided to edit it in black and white because there's really no color in there that makes any difference to the picture. And what I love about it is, and again, these are some of these things that are sort of like serendipity. If you see the cloud on the right, it is bending along with the road, and
amazing.
And it's it's like
amazing.
I couldn't have planned that. These things just happen, but I did notice it, and I just wanted to be sure to take a picture of it. And then the interesting thing is, I think less than a week after I took this picture, somebody pulled the trailer away. It was gone. So I'm really glad I did it when I did.
So that brings to mind there's a certain element of timing and catching the moment in photography. The reason we met is because you were walking along in downtown Sioux Falls and happened to take a picture of my friend's dog as my friend was walking him, and the dog is just looking, almost smiling at the camera, and
That's right.
it's just perfect. But to get that picture, you just had an instant to take that.
Yeah.
What, what is that like, being so sensitive to the changing world that you can capture a moment like that?
Well, I think that I think I'm definitely still learning to be aware. I think that's what it is to be aware. To see things that other people don't see is the only thing that sets a photographer apart from somebody else, I think.
To see things that other people don't see is the only thing that sets a photographer
Honestly,
apart.
and,
Wow.
and I'm always amazed. I have friends, or I'll look on Instagram and see someone taking a photo of something, and I'm like, why haven't I ever thought of that? Because
Mhm.
they have developed the art to a greater extent than I have, and so sometimes it's just like you focus in on something. But anyway, also I think there's a lot of luck involved, and there's other, just like the subject sometimes participates, and in this case, the dog, I think Freddie is the name,
Yeah, yeah.
participated
Good.
by immediately realizing. And it's, by the way, I have a little magazine that I created called Pets of Sioux Falls, and it's got a lot of they're in there, and there's got some other pictures of pets in downtown as well as behind windows. But the funny thing is, I've noticed that when I take pictures of dogs and stuff in the street, the owners absolutely don't realize I'm taking a picture, but the dog instantly sees me taking the picture and looks at the camera and looks straight at you.
Oh,
But this
wow.
was one of those cases. And but yeah, I don't know. Like, it's a lot of times after the fact, you kind of go, well, what was I thinking? And I wasn't really thinking. So one of my photographic heroes is Saul Leiter. He passed away not that long ago, actually, and he wasn't really. He was a photographer in New York. He did a lot of like fashion photography in his younger days, and then he sort of retired, and he was just like taking pictures. And he wasn't really discovered until he was like 80. And I watched some talks where, after he became really famous, he started going on this, people would invite him to places and talk about photography, these big, conferences. And these students would ask him, like, so what were you thinking when you took this shot? And he says, I wasn't thinking anything. I saw something, I took a picture.
Mhm.
And that's kind of how it is most of the time. I mean, certainly in street photography, like there are times where, you set up to take a shot, and you really, like for a landscape or something, and you really prepare for it and you make sure everything's right. But in street photography, you don't have that luxury. Things change all the time. Things move all the time.
Is this a good example of just seeing an instant and snapping a picture?
Right. And this was taken on a camera that is a film camera with no autofocus or nothing. And you have to manually set everything, including the exposure.
What?
And
How do you have time to do all that?
well, once you try, the light doesn't change all that much. So the exposure was kind of set. And I just had I was walking behind this couple, and I saw this other couple in the far behind them, and I'm like, I got to take this shot. So the only thing I had time to do was focus, and even that I had to kind of rush to do. I want to talk about that, by the way, because I think that people get overly concerned about focus. I have some very nice shots that I really, really love, where I didn't exactly nail focus. And it's not important because you can see the picture and you can see what it means, and the expressions on people's faces are just priceless. And this is in focus, but also it's on film, and happens to be a pretty grainy film. And I actually think that adds something to the mood. It's sort of there. It creates a little mystery. You can't even read the State Theater, marquee behind them. And
It's just very vague.
yeah, well, and a part of it is because, again, this is a very shallow depth of field. I used a very fast lens with a wide open aperture on this, but also because it's grainy, and so the things sort of fade a little bit. But I think it really adds something. There's a mood that gets created, and I wanted to include this is also film, but this is color. And I wanted to kind of put a little word in about film because, we're so into digital now, but as you might know, film is really making a comeback. And I've really gotten into it. I have a bunch of film cameras of different types and different types of film. And there's so many different black and white films that all have a different feel, a different sense, a different look to them, and also color film. And I love this particular film. This is Kodak Portra 160. 160 stands for the ISO, so it's like it's not very sensitive, so you have to really take it during daylight. And
Oh wow.
so if you consider, like, most digital cameras can go up to 1600 or 3200, 6400, and this is 160. So you cannot take this indoors without serious flash. And I saw this really cool motorcycle sitting there, and with the lights, it's in a little alley, and there's these little Christmas lights hanging there all the time. And just the particular colors, the combination of the particular greens and the reds and the yellow from the lights just do something. And it is a quality of the film itself, of the particular stock, the emulsion that is on that film, and the way that it treats color. And similar with black and white, how the blacks and the grays, what kind of contrast is it? Is it very, sharp contrast, or is it sort of all grayscale? It depends on what kind of shot you're looking for. Also, some film is more grainy than other film. And usually the more sensitive the film is, the more grainy it is. And so, I just want to kind of show off how beautiful film can be, and how grain is something that should be, I think, embraced as part of this mood setting that you can do. It's almost like, it's almost like, when you're painting like something in an impressionist way, like there's little dots of things, and when you move away from it, you see the full picture. And I think grain, really grainy film is a little bit like that.
Serge, where did you take this photo?
Where do I take it to get it developed?
No, where did you take that? What city did you take this photo in?
Oh, this particular photo. Oh, sorry. This is so there's an alley between 11th Street. No, sorry.
So you took it in Sioux Falls.
This is downtown Sioux Falls, in a little alley. I think it's behind.
I thought of this with your photograph of Tempe too. There's a certain universality about these photos, like that photo. I mean, actually, both the Tempe photo and the motorcycle photo, I could see those being locations in Europe.
Yeah.
Just because the senior capture has a texture just reminds me of different places. So,
well, thank you. I think part of that is it's part of the it's not just seeing things that other people don't see. It's also going places other people don't go. I love going through alleys, whether it's in a downtown. I now live in in the Cathedral neighborhood in Sioux Falls, and the absolute best place to see that. And I've taken a lot of neighborhood photos.
Cathedral, this is a Sioux Falls thing, but the Cathedral neighborhood does have great alleys for sure.
Yeah, there's a lot of old houses, a lot of old mansions, and built in the late 1800s, early 1900s, and yeah, I think the best view of those houses is from the alleys.
Yeah, yeah. So for someone who's not a photographer who draws their art from a medium other than photography, what would you invite them to think about the next time they see a photograph by a professional artist?
I would say look, if they're interested in photography, and I think that looking at professional photography is actually an excellent way to learn about it and to become a better photographer. And not just photography, also paintings, any kind of art like that, visual art. Look at how it's framed, for one thing. I think in the beginning, and I certainly was guilty of this, I was focusing so much on, I want to get this nice bokeh, I want to get this nice blurry background, when in fact, like, what are you trying to have in look at all the things that are happening. How can you keep the eye, like, yeah, here's the thing I would ask someone when they're looking at a picture is, where do your eyes go? Where do you see your eyes going? Because one of the sort of tricks of photo of framing the shot is finding leading lines, finding like lines that go across or that follow into the distance, having different things happen at once, where you look at one thing, you notice the first thing, and then you notice, oh, there's another thing happening. And like, how much time are your eyes spending on that photo before they naturally move away from it because they've seen enough? That's kind of an interesting thing to think about. And then to try and apply that to your own photography. Like, how can you, like, what are you taking a picture of? Are you just taking a picture of a single thing and it's kind of a boring thing? Are you trying to take a picture, like, for example, the picture of the couple that was embracing each other on the street? That was kind of cool, but it was not as cool as having another couple in the distance holding hands. And so there's connection there. So that's kind of why I took that picture. It wasn't the first couple, it was the combination of the two couples together.
Fascinating. As I told you before we came on, I could talk to you for 5 or 10 hours, but it's structured as a 1 hour show, so we're not going to do that. Is it okay if I share your website?
Absolutely. Yes, please.
And please go to Serge's website. It's just beautiful. The photos are beautiful. The words you've written are inspiring. Please go there.
Thank you. You really, wow. I don't know what to say.
And I ask all my guests this usually as a final question. So in my work, I talk about the power of doing our imperfect best, and what doing my imperfect best means to me as I envision the best I want for myself in the world, and I go towards it. But when mistakes happen and obstacles come up, instead of using them to try to convince myself not to do the thing, I try to learn from all that and move forward. What does doing your imperfect best mean to you, Serge van Neck? Serge van Neck.
I think it means, I mean, there's a verse in the Baha'i writings that I don't think I have it memorized, but to paraphrase it is, make make every morning better than the previous night, and make every night better than every day better than the previous one, right? And so, and also, we are actually, one of the things that we have to do is take ourselves, is really, like, take an account of our day at the end of each day, and look to what we can improve on the following day. So this is a constant, bringing ourselves to account instead of waiting till we can, give confession to somebody, or wait until we die. We bring ourselves to account every single day. And I think that is one way to try and be our own imperfect best, is to, I hope I said that right, but I think realizing that we are all imperfect, and giving ourselves grace to be imperfect, because one of the things that I sometimes have been told by friends is, don't be so hard on yourself. And I think that's really good advice.
Thank you so much for meeting a guy during your show, and listening to his request that you be on his Awkwardly Awesome podcast.
I just want to say, I've watched some of your episodes, and I love your show, and I love the type of guests that you have on. And by the way, I knew you were an amazing person the moment I met you. So, so I'm very glad, very glad you walked up to me, that you came to the show and walked up to me. Thank you so much for the invitation.
You're welcome, and thank you. And I'm glad we live in the same general place. So
right,
I hope we can do.
We'll see each other. We'll see more of each other, I'm sure.
Awesome, cool. Oh my gosh, I just I spent many of my younger years being more reserved, and hanging out mainly with people I already knew, and I love doing that. I love having longtime friends, but I also really enjoy meeting new people. Serge has brought so much. I mean, what he's into is extremely interesting to me, and he's given me new perspectives on photography. And I even read an article of his on street photography, which was phenomenal. And if I hadn't had the courage to go up and meet him, none of that would have happened. I know meeting new people can seem scary, because as humans we tend to be scared of the unknown, but it also can be so rewarding. So I encourage you to as you're able, as you find the courage to if someone inspires, if you're interested in someone and want to get to know them better, just go up and introduce yourself. So anyway, those are my reflections for today. Thanks for tuning in, and please, whether you're watching live or on replay, thank you. Please leave comments if you're so inspired. We love comments, and tune in for another episode of Awkwardly Awesome Podcast next week, where you'll get to meet someone new. And And here's my outro, which I remembered to play for the second week in the world. Wow! Cool. Have a good day.